Welcome to this week's episode of the Good Luck Club podcast. My guest this week is entrepreneur Jenny Knighting, founder and CEO of Nutcracker Agency. Jenny, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Simon. It's great to be here.
Well, maybe you could start off by telling my audience a little bit about yourself.
So I founded Nutcracker 6 years ago with the specific goal of closing the gap between sales and marketing. I think that often sales and marketing teams, they work in silos, and actually if you can align them, that's when kind of the magic happens. And I also noticed a real disconnect between how marketing was run from agencies. You'd kind of have a digital marketing agency, you'd have a social media agency, you'd have a creative agency. Didn't seem to make a lot of sense to me, when really they should all be talking to each other to maximize kind of results. And I also wanted to found a business which created an environment where people could thrive. So that's what I've been doing for the last 6 years. Prior to that, I worked for a number of startup scale-ups, very much leading on the commercial side of the businesses. I've always loved challenges. So startups, whether that's events or businesses, that's kind of my passion.
Was it a big leap of faith to go from working for someone else to starting your own business?
Yes and no. I dipped my toe in the water probably 10 years previously, with a couple of ex-colleagues approached me and asked me to do a startup events business. But I was very much sheltered because they were doing kind of the warts and all of running it. But I'd had experience there of kind of the buck very much stopping with me, and, kind of that insecurity, if you like, of not being bankrolled by an established business. And when I decided to set up Nutcracker, it was really quite impulsive. I was about to take over quite a big job at the business side, really sweated blood and tears to help build. And I just had a light bulb moment where a number of things had contributed to it, but I kind of on the spot wrote my resignation letter and registered the business the next day. And when my husband said to me that night, "You've had a good day," he was quite surprised.
Sometimes that is the best way. I think for my listeners out there, I mean, that's a good story. Sometimes people talk about how they planned it and it was very methodical. But sometimes it is, you just go for it, right? And you jump in. Sounds like that's what you did. And then went home and told your partner, which is a great way to announce you have a business.
Yeah, I mean, when you've got two small kids at home, obviously it's probably not what he was expecting. But I think it's easier if you have a commercial background, because it's not such a punt, because you can sell, you can do things. I think it's a harder journey to make that leap if you come from a product-based background or a technical background, because you don't necessarily have you've got the skills to bring a product, then how do you get it to market? So I think it's easy to be impulsive if you can sell things yourself.
It's a very interesting insight. I can concur. I'm a sales and marketing person myself. I feel like sometimes to start a business, I don't feel like it's that risky. I feel like once you know how to sell and you can get business in, as you say, it's a lot less risky than maybe an engineer building something and then not knowing if it will get to market. So
and often the businesses that I help or work closely with, the real disconnect is not having a strong sales and marketing arm. The product can be great, but if no one knows about it, it's not going to sell anything, right? So, I think it does give you an advantage if you know that you can pick a phone up. And I guess that was one of the foundations I learned in that business I mentioned previously. Starting having no database, no nothing, but knowing we had to put an event on in 6 months. You kind of put your money where your mouth is and see, right, I think I'm good. Let's see how good I am. And you're calling companies like Microsoft and IBM, they're saying we don't support launch events, let alone launch businesses. And then you get them you make them sponsor the event. That kind of fear is abated because you can do it no matter what the circumstances. So I guess starting something without that fear is a massive advantage.
Did you come straight out of school into a job, or what did you do at school and how did it play out?
Yeah, so I had a mixed early start in school, but then found my feet, and then I went on to get a politics degree. So I kind of went all the way through. So I can't tell you it was some impressive story like you, where I left at like 16, 17. And then,
wasn't impressive at the time, I would like to add. Somehow in retrospect it sounds impressive, but at the time everyone thought I was insane. But I mean, do you find that when you started out you had a natural ability for sales straight up? Did you know that in school? I'm just thinking about my listeners out there trying to identify what their skill is.
You know, like I was always that child that talked too much. I always fidgeted. I always couldn't sit still. Like when I was little, obviously I grew out of that. You'll be pleased to hear. You know, I guess I've always been a talker, and a politics degree is all about putting your point of view across, all about debating. It's all about winning an argument, isn't it? Which I know sales isn't an argument, but it's that kind of that process. And when I started out my first job, I started a different job, and very, very quickly, the CEO of that business said, "We think you should be in sales." I mean, it was a very quick process, whereas, you know, clearly was absolutely appalling at administration, and my natural strength lied in sales. So yeah, it was a kind of quick evolution. And, you know, I kind of never look back. I mean, to me, sales is just getting paid to talk. It's amazing.
Yeah, a lot of people don't like sales. I think sales is a wonderful word. I think somehow it's become somewhat of a dirty word, seen as an inappropriate thing to describe yourself as a salesperson, as if it's bad. But I think salespeople are amazing. I know I am one, so I would say that. But if you get sales right, it can feed a business, it can grow a business, and you can make meaningful relationships over time with people like no other discipline.
I think the reason why people say it's so hard to find good salespeople is because exactly what you say, people either go into sales because they don't have a passion for it, they don't respect it as an art. And I think what a lot of people forget is that whatever they're in, for any business, they're in a sales role. If they're in marketing, they're selling something. If they're in product development, they're selling, like, everybody sells something. It's just somewhere along the lines, people want to kind of go, I'm in sales. But I don't really get that. Like if I was interviewing a salesperson, they mumbled they're in sales, I'd be like, you're not a salesperson, go and do something else. Like I don't really get why people aren't more proud of it as a profession, because I think it's fabulous too.
Couldn't agree more. I think I'm going to have you on just to talk about sales, but today I want to document your story.
Talk about it all day long.
Yeah, me too, for that matter. But I think I want to try and get to grips with your history and what learnings you've had as an entrepreneur. And I wondered if you could share with our audience, as a measure of how you think, what you see as success and what success means to you.
So for me, I don't think success is one-dimensional. I think that if you're going to give a benchmark of one aspect of your life, then I think that's quite short-sighted. I mean, success comes in lots of different packages, whether it's success for how we're achieving for our clients, success for how happy the team are, success for how I'm tracking against my short to long-term plans. I think success for me there's lots of different aspects in my life, professionally, but also personally, there's other aspects. So for me, success isn't one-dimensional. There's lots of areas that I want to feel successful in, to feel I'm achieving.
Is there any one particular thing that you kind of have as a target of success?
You know, I mean, I guess I've always, since I founded the business, I've had fairly concrete strategies in place in terms of how I want the business to grow. So from a fundamental, like from an obvious point of view, is the business tracking against my strategy? That's quite an easy way to measure it. And obviously with what's happened recently with COVID, that's certainly been an interesting period of time. And having had the security of the business threatened, I'd say that's probably more important than I realised pre-COVID, because the business kind of evolved and was successful. And I mean, of course, there's been extremely difficult times, but not from a financial perspective. So I think I've come to realise that after the last few months, actually, success is probably wrapped up with security more than I probably would have said before.
Yeah, I think security is an interesting word, isn't it? As a construct, what is security? What is security for you, do you think?
So I think, I could get really deep here. I don't know. I think security to me is probably how I'm feeling emotionally myself. Like, I think with running your own business, I mean, and I'm the sole shareholder, I don't have a board to report to, the buck stops with me. I think for me, it's not allowing that fear. I very rarely give in to fear. When I started the business, you know, lots of people told me that I wouldn't achieve my first year targets. You know, people are so quick to, you know, to create doubt in your mind, I guess, especially, you know, it was only 6 years ago, but being female, having small children, like, people are very quick to kind of try and make you have doubt in your journey. And I've never had that fear. The second I try and give into fear that comes across my mind, that's when things don't feel possible. So for me, I think success is when I'm feeling really strong mentally and my perception is good, and then I can cope with a lot of different challenges that life throws my way. I think perception is really key. What's your perception like? And I think success is often interlinked with, and I know it's cheesy, but it is your attitude. Your positive attitude does breed success. And I'm a really firm believer in that.
Interesting. I couldn't agree with you more. It's interesting that as well that I think people will say things to you, and I'm thinking about my audience again when people might say, I would like to start a business of my own. And they'd say, well, we'll do it later, or why don't you finish your education first, for example, or why don't you go to university first? Or there's always, and often these are with good intentions, right? People say these things because they love you, but they can also hold you back. But it sounds like you pushed through some of those early doubts or comments. How did you push through? Was it just a self-belief, or did you believe in your idea so much, or what was it that made you push through those?
I don't think I'm very good at being told what to do. I think it's as simple as that. I mean, I was being brought up, I do have a very strong father figure who installed in me a sense of self-belief. And I think in a professional capacity, I've never failed. Of course, I've failed in some ways, but I've never failed in how I perceive failure. So I think for me, I didn't really listen to what people had to say. I mean, when COVID struck and the business took a downturn, I had people around me saying, furlough the whole team, press pause. And I was just thinking, why would I do that? I spent more money. I kept as many people as I could in play to market the business more. And the end result is Nutcracker secured 11 clients in 8 weeks. Well, that wouldn't have happened if I'd listened to those people around me. So I think that's not to say you can't get a lot of value from mentors, you can't get a lot of value from talking to experts, but I think you always have to have a pinch of sort of why. Why do people try and push doubt into you? Is it because they wish they had the balls to do it themselves? Is it because they're insecure? What is governing someone to tell you that you can't achieve your dream? And I think that's quite complex to really get to the bottom of that.
Yeah, I agree.
That makes sense.
It does make a lot of sense. I think it's an interesting subject, and I'm sure a lot of my listeners have this problem where they have actually succumbed to other people's opinions, because sometimes they can come from people that actually care about you. So they think they've got your best interest at heart, but like you say, often they've got their own baggage. So
they've got their own baggage, yeah. And I think really it's about listening to what you want. I mean, unless you're doing something particularly stupid or reckless, you don't look back with regrets at what you've done. You look back with regrets at what you didn't do. So I think life is really there for grasping, and people say, what if it fails? Well, if it fails, we'll do something else. Like, the world will not end. You will, but you will have had that experience. And what if it doesn't fail? What if it succeeds? And I think too many people look at what ifs in a negative way, saying what if, and then it's the worst case scenario. Whereas what if, and it's the best case. I mean, I had an interesting chat with one team today about when you're born, human beings are automatically programmed to be quite pessimistic. And, positive people actually have gone against that natural pessimism. And I think that when you start or found a business, that optimism and that feeling of you can do, and that absolute determination to succeed is what will see you through. And positivity, and going out there and really believing in what you're doing, as long as you've got good people around you, you've got good ideas, you've got good strategy, you can execute it. There's no reason why businesses, unless it's a terrible idea, won't have a chance of success.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I have with my 3-year-old, I can see it. He thinks everything is possible. Actually, he's born with a complete optimistic mindset, to the point where he actually thinks he can climb very high walls and jump off them without any problem. And it's me that has the fear and is busy telling him he can't do this and he can't do that. But he absolutely believes he can do it all. But somehow over time, I think we do somewhat suppress people based on our own beliefs. Like, I look at how high he can jump at 3 and I'm assuming he can't do it, but he can. He does. And so it's me that believes he can't do it. It doesn't mean he can't, right? So again.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've heard that podcast. It's a TED talk from Ken Robinson around creativity in schools, schools killing creativity in our kids.
Yes. And I've had the privilege to meet Ken, so I'm a big fan. Yeah. And
I'm extremely jealous, because it really resonated with me, his talk. And I thought it was so interesting that we indoctrinate people to learn in such rigid boundaries. Yeah, the kid that can't sit still, like perhaps they're a dancer, but whatever, I found what he said really resonated. And like, with your 3-year-olds, like, why do we suddenly make people self-conscious, aware, fearful. I don't know why. Perhaps it's human instinct to survive, and we're just trying to protect them from breaking their legs.
Like you say, this could get very deep, because this can go all the way back to like the early days of manufacturing and basically wanting to put people, make them become automated. So they all wear the same uniform, so they all fall into line and work on the same production line. You know, ultimately they blend into the background and service the needs of the 1%. Starting to get into conspiracy theories now, but yeah, I mean, there's definitely something in it, isn't there?
It's your questions. You can't blame me.
No, they're not, and it's my fault. I'm taking us there as well. Just stepping back from conspiracy theories that I'm now putting out there. But do your parents like the entrepreneurial path that you take? And are they entrepreneurs? It sounds like your father's very supportive. How did your mother view entrepreneurship?
So my parents worked in the NHS, both successful in their own fields. But no, they're very proud of what I do. I mean, I think with me, I've always been a bit of a free spirit. I've always kind of done what I want to do. And there's been times where, you know, I phoned my dad at the end of my tether and just said, Dad, I can't do this. He said, well, what do you want to do? Go and bake cakes? You know, what's the option? What's the alternative? You know, so there's nothing wrong with baking cakes, by the way. I love baking cakes.
You're making me hungry just talking about cakes.
I mean, I'm a big cake fan, so that was a terrible example.
I know exactly what you mean, though. It's like, this is what your path is. This is who you are. So just get on with it.
What do you want to do? Opt out. It's like, you know, when you have a degree of success, it's very quick to see people who just can't cope with it. And then what do you want to do? You want to just dumb yourself down to feel like you can either opt in or opt out, can't you? And I guess I've always wanted to, you know, opt in.
And I always ask this question of my guests, and do you think entrepreneurs are born or bred?
You know, I think it's quite interesting. I think that there's certain characteristics that lend themselves to being entrepreneurs, but I think there's also a level of experience. If you look at, say, someone like yourself who started so young, it's hard to argue that's not born in you. Like, there's not characteristics driving you on, just, you know, whatever propelled you in your early years. But I think it's a mixture of the two. I don't necessarily think you wake up, like, if you were born with certain A-type personality traits and all the rest of it, you know, you're automatically going to run your own business. I think there's life experience, like experiences that come in life which prompt you to think that way or prompt you to think it's possible. I really think it's a mixture of the two. I think certainly people with certain characteristics types will find it easier. You know, those prone to dealing better with stress, those people who are very focused, quite driven, I think have higher energy levels. I think they're going to naturally find it an easier path. So I do definitely think it suits certain characteristics better than others.
Do you think you would ever work for someone else again?
You know, I had a boss who I worked with on and off for a very long time, who told me that I was unmanageable and that he was the only person that could manage me. So probably not.
It's interesting.
No, I mean, but of course I would. You know, sometimes I think, crikey, it'd be easy to be a creative and commercial director somewhere. I'm bloody good at it. Like, but you know, I started this journey to build a business and to scale it and to exit it. And that's what I'm going to do. And then I'd love to go on to be, you know, a non-exec director of businesses to do what I do best. And that's to help business growth.
I think it's for a lot of people listening out there, of course, the path of building a business is many ways where it ends up to. So my business, for example, was purchased by PwC, but I could have gone to work for them. Actually, I wouldn't have minded as such, other than I was working on something else by the time they bought my company. But the point is that sometimes, as long as you're enjoying what you do every day, you can, right? As long as you're given autonomy and freedom, which is what sounds like is important to you. Yeah,
but I think in that situation, that'd be very hard, wouldn't it? To have your own business that you've sold, especially to a business like PwC, and to watch it change irreversibly. I think that's quite hard.
It's hard when you're not working in it, to be honest. And
I think like it's your baby, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an interesting element because, you know, everyone dreams of building their business up and selling it for a lot of money, but the reality of when you've actually done it, it's a bit like selling one of your children.
I can imagine.
You know, you're free suddenly to go and do what you want at the weekends, but you're like, hold on a minute.
Where's it gone?
Where's that little child gone? But but your parents both worked in the NHS, but when you've fallen into this entrepreneur world, there was never that pressure to say, well, you know, education and you know, get a proper job. They've always. I know you've said they were supportive, but there was never that.
No, I mean, I had quite a rapid rise in my career to very senior positions very young. I was always very driven in the business world. And it was my dad saying, what you got to lose? If it doesn't work, go and get another job. Like, so yeah, no, I mean, they couldn't see why I wouldn't do it.
Good advice there, by the way. I think with the listeners out there, you know, if it doesn't work, you can just get another job.
Yeah, my dad was like, what's the big deal? Like, you know, you can always come up with your share of money if you have to. I could go and work in Pizza Express and you go and clean people's, like, there's always ways to earn money. But, you know, you got to follow your dream, haven't you, if you've got one? So,
yeah, so I guess I was just wondering a little bit more about the whole process of where you want to go with the business. You 6 years in, what's interesting about you, I think, is this, as you mentioned earlier, you are the sole owner and you are the sole founder, right? So there's an element of, to me, that can sometimes sound quite tough as well. That's quite a lot to carry on your shoulders. Of course, at the same time, it gives you freedom. But for people that are thinking about getting a partnership versus going the way you've done, we're talking about, you know, what advice or insights can you share with us around that?
I think it's difficult either way. For those looking at starting a business, there's a great book by Jamie Waller called Unsexy Business. And in that, he looks at different businesses who have had partnerships. Well, it's not the purpose of it. It just happens to be that these businesses in their journey, they have partnerships that cause pain points. As a sole founder, you know, yes, it's difficult because it can be very lonely. It can be very difficult. You can feel like you're just giving and giving and giving and giving, and it's very tough. But I wouldn't do it any differently. That's not to say that I don't think that people can have value. Like one of the people in my team, who my head of content, Charlotte's been with the business for 5.5 years. She definitely plays a role in, you know, when things are too much, kind of dissecting it and talking it through, as do other people around me. So, but I think knowing the buck stops with you, like if you want to give someone promotion, if you want to give someone a pay rise, if you need to make them exit the business and you haven't got to have some great big consensus, it's just your decision. I think it makes it easier. And the times where the business has been pushed to the edge, and maybe the business hasn't, I've been pushed to the edge. Being able to make the decisions myself has made it much easier to manage and much easier to diffuse or escalate whatever, you know, whichever is needed, rather than kind of having to get buy-in from people around me. But of course, that's because that's my experience. If I was in a business which had partners, I'd probably swear blind that was best.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've had all sorts of structures and different businesses, and to be honest, there's no perfect setup. Yeah,
I think you get challenges, whatever. I mean, certainly some of the businesses that I work with that are founded, and there's, you know, a few founders, like inevitably one of them seems to fall out and they exit. Like, I don't think there's a perfect path, whatever you choose to do. I think you have to be adaptable and be able to adapt to what's happening, and also be aware that it's not going to be a utopia. It's not going to have butterflies floating around you and little birds tweeting. It's going to be tough at times, and it's having the resilience to be able to cope with that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I sometimes use the analogy of marriage. You know, sometimes you can get married and it can be the most amazing experience, and you're together 50 years and it's perfect. And other times you'll give her 3 months and end up wanting to kill each other and having a divorce, or you don't get married at all. And yeah. You know, so there's just so many different ways to do it. But you've never been tempted to have a co-founder?
No.
And you've never thought about bringing partnerships in the last 6 years? There's never been a moment you're like, you know what, I don't want any more staff turnover. Just, you know, be a shareholder and join. That's never crossed your mind? Well,
I think there's a couple of people at business that I've earmarked to have some, like, that's different. Like, there's people that if I exit, I want to benefit from because they've played a intrinsic part in building the business. But no, I've never felt like that.
It's also interesting point again for my listeners to pick up on. I think sometimes with people that are working with you, they don't necessarily want the burden of equity. They don't necessarily want the burden of ownership. Sometimes there's also a downside to that, right? You have costs some months that don't meet your income. You know, you have responsibilities there.
I don't think anyone at Nutcracker wants my job. I think that no one. I keep saying swap, and they're like, no way. I think the people that I know will benefit should the business ever exit know me well enough to know that they will do very well out of it. And I think that works for Nutcracker. I think that's good. I think if Nutcracker gets to a stage where that's on the cards, then I'll obviously have agreements, you know, drawn up so that they know how they're going to benefit. But no, I've certainly not thought about diluting it because, you know, it's been it's been 6 years now of a really tough slog of sacrifice, of hard work, of highs, but also lows. And I think suddenly bring someone in now, I think that'd be very difficult.
I know you said earlier you made a very quick decision to start the business, but I bet you spent a long time thinking about the name. I feel like Nutcracker is such a good name.
Oh my goodness, I'm going to be such a letdown. No, I didn't. I basically, every single name I've thought of, which I shouldn't admit as I'm a creative lead, was taken, much to my disgust. Someone else had thought of it. That's not the same with obviously my advertising campaigns. They are unique and amazing.
Totally, of course, yeah.
But then my husband came in and said, what about Nutcracker? Cracking the tough ones. He like sketched a walnuts and you're cracking it and there's peeling back the layers. And then I checked out the Nutcracker Ballet, and luckily good conquers evil, otherwise I'd been a bit stuffed if the baddies had won. And so it just kind of aligned. And it's memorable, isn't it? I like the fact that it's memorable. It's quirky. So no, it was a kind of instant decision. I decided on the spot to resign, and my boss, who I'd worked with on a number of years, I knew would convince me otherwise. So before I went into work, the next time I was due in, I knew I had to have registered the business. So it was a very quick decision of what to call the business and then register it and do it.
Well, that's probably another learning. I think I personally spend a long time thinking about names of companies, and sometimes, again, just picking a name and going with it and making it work.
Well, the second you analyse it, you don't like anything.
That's true, yeah.
Whereas it's like a baby, isn't it? Once your baby's born, if you call it Isabel, you can't imagine them being Gertrude.
Yeah.
I ever had Gertrude on my shortlist, but
no, Gertrude the agency.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with Gertrude either.
Again, you're very politically correct at points, highlighting all of these things are fine.
Gertie's a really cute name. In fact, I should have had Gertie on my list.
Gertie, maybe the next company, Gertie. I'm writing it down and trademarking it straight away. Like it. How do you see? As we are the Good Luck Club podcast, we have to talk about luck from time to time. How do you view luck in business, and has luck played a part in your business?
I think it's when I saw, you might ask this question, my natural response is I don't believe in luck. I do believe in creating opportunities. Having said that, I thought I can't say that because that sounds really rubbish. So I think from a good luck perspective, when I founded Nutcracker, I happened to go to a lunch where I would never normally have gone. And I've met someone who said, what are you doing now? I said, funnily enough, I've just launched a business today. They said, what is it? And I said, it's sales and marketing. And they said, well, my husband's business is looking for an agency. And I got introduced, and I went into pitch against 2 established businesses in the manufacturing world and 2 who were just very good agencies, have won lots of awards. And I kind of went in going, how long have you been going? About a day. And through that introduction, Nutcracker got appointed. They were still my flagship clients. And it's been a fabulous journey with them, fascinating business. I love what I do with them. So the good luck aspect is, say I hadn't gone to that lunch, could have been sitting here going, the first year was terrible, it was awful. Instead, it was amazing. Bad luck, I think Brexit was tough. Some of my clients, their turnover is very much linked in with, say, FTSE 100. Some of their suppliers, some of those companies had to wait to see the outcome of Brexit because obviously the impact on the currency, it affected my business because obviously every knock-on effect comes down the food chain. That was tough. And obviously, COVID, we could never have planned for a global pandemic. Having said that, lots more positive has come out of the COVID impact for Nutcracker than Brexit. Brexit was just painful. It just felt like it was just putting growth on hold, whereas COVID has felt like it's full of opportunity. So that's just for me personally. I'm not suggesting for one instant all the terrible, impact on lots of businesses, but for Nutcracker personally, there's been some massive positives that have come from this period. So yeah, so I guess that's my good luck and my bad luck. But I do believe that you do create your own opportunities. So it's not lucky that Nutcracker grew. Myself and the team have worked our backsides off. It's not lucky that clients have sent referrals. We've produced exceptional work. That's why they want to recommend us. And I think if more people have that anchor, that you have that control, life feels more solid because you're not waiting for luck to happen. You're creating it and you're making that kind of luck happen for yourself.
Yeah, I actually agree with you. My personal view, and that's one of the reasons I like bringing this subject up in the podcast and debating it with people, is that there's actually 2 types of luck. The dictionary actually needs an update. I'm working on it. But one is this random luck, let's say where you're born. Not really anything you can do about that. right? That's not anything you're in control of, but it can bring you huge advantages. Equally, you can argue something like COVID is not anyone's fault. Despite conspiracy theories, it's nobody's fault, and ultimately, how you view that luck or that bad luck moment is how ultimately you deal with it. Ultimately, whether or not it turns out to be good luck or bad luck for you. So I can understand your point about COVID. I think it's interesting you make a comparison between COVID and Brexit as kind of good luck, bad luck scenarios. And what's interesting about that is I think for me, Brexit was a very divisive thing. It caused a lot of good people to fight with each other. I feel with COVID, in a way, we're kind of united around trying to get through it, which is somehow, in a bizarre twist, more positive, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd not thought of it like that, and perhaps that is quite a critical difference. Is that, in fact, that's really interesting. That could well be the difference as to why it's been a positive rather than it feeling really difficult, because Brexit dragged on for so long. It affected, people that said it didn't affect business. That's just political, isn't it? It did. Whether or not long term it would or won't, that then becomes political, because no one can get their little balls out and predict the future.
Yes. Nutcracker, little balls. I can see a theme slowly building up here. But
to be fair, I didn't want to tell you, but I have got some, but I'll keep them.
I'm sure. But no, I think also, I guess with Brexit, I mean, within my own family, we were arguing with each other, but with COVID, we're all about protecting, our elderly.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting what you said there. And I mean, I think, yes, I've never thought of it like that, but I think that's definitely perhaps why positives have come from it.
You mentioned earlier going to a lunch and just when you started the business and meeting your client and kind of, I guess you put yourself out there though, right? I mean, you asked the university, you said you're starting a business and you went out there and you asked the university and it gave you a client.
I'd never marketed a manufacturing product. I'd never even worked at an agency, so I could have turned up and gone on the 5th pitch. This is silly. Instead, I just thought, well, why wouldn't they want me?
Right.
Like, why wouldn't they want Nutcracker? We're going to be amazing. We're going to, and Nutcracker did change a fortune, that business. Like, I was lucky though, because when I had this life-changing weekend, I'd worked in media for quite a few years, trying to add it up quickly, but I couldn't. About 16 years, and I just thought, who are the best people I have ever worked with? And then I called them and said, look, will you be on my founding team? There's no, will you step in if I've got freelance work? Will you be united? And I was really lucky that every single one said yes. And they were, or they still are, exceptionally talented people. So I was, is that lucky? I had great relationships with them. It was respect was mutual. So I don't know, but that definitely was an advantage that I kind of walked in with a killer team. Now, obviously, when the business grew, I needed to replace them with employees, but those people did play a part in the early days of giving me their credibility and their support, and that was very helpful.
Yeah, and I think when you put luck into two separate categories, the random luck and the luck you make for yourself, what you're talking about there is that you built up a reputation, you'd worked hard, you'd been sincere, you'd made relationships with people, and then when you needed their help, they helped you and got involved in supporting winning that work, right? So you made your own luck. That's a different type of luck in my view. Part of what I wish I could take this confidence I feel that you have and give it to my listeners that don't have it. I'd love if there was a way. We need to come up with a device or some sort of energy wave, because I when I listen to you talk about kind of pushing through, like you're saying, winning this client, you knew you could, why not try? I think that's such a big part of the entrepreneur spirit, and you can come from any walk of life. If you have that, I think you can make anything happen. And that's what I'm loving about what you're saying personally.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that those people that are feeling, I do a lot of work with self-esteem and all the rest of it. And I totally get that a massive advantage is my inbred confidence. Like, it's a massive advantage over people that have self-doubt, who have, that lack of self-belief. But, someone juggling with it, you've really got to ask yourself, what have you got to lose? What is so frightening about failing at something? And the second you allow yourself, or you tell yourself it's okay to fail, fear goes. It's okay. If I walked into that pitch and I hadn't got it, it would have been okay. And it would be more than okay, because I would have learned something from it that made me better next time. And I think it's taking those positives and really looking at, when something goes wrong, it would be very Disney of me to say that everything's perfect and rosy, nothing ever goes wrong at Nutcracker. When something goes wrong, which invariably it does, for me, what I say to the team is, you don't judge a team by when things are going well. You judge a team by when the shit hits. When you're up against it. And I think that's really true in, when you're doing anything. It's not about what happens when it's all perfect, but how you react, how resilient you are, how you deal with the downturn. And I think anyone that wants to go into an entrepreneurial path, you've got to be prepared for those downturns. It is going to be tough. Like, I've had days where, I felt so overwhelmed. No one else knew because I have a great ability to mask it, but I felt really overwhelmed, and I'm smiling and joking the whole time and cheer them up, but thinking in my head, oh my goodness. And you just got to have that resilience to know that it's one day at a time, just keep going. It's a bit like, I started jogging during COVID. I've wanted to do it for years, but having no time because I run my own business, having kids, I never got around to it. Whereas, I started jogging, sport, I was obsessed with sport at school. Thought, this is easy. I can do anything I want. I better run for 10 miles. Of course I couldn't. I got to the end of the road, almost had a heart attack. But, a few weeks on, I run 5K before I start work in the mornings. But that's a step at a time. It was like little victories. It was getting to past that tree that I could only get to in the first few weeks, and getting to the cafe and getting to here. And I think it's all about those milestones, stretching yourself that bit further. It's not, Rome wasn't conquered in a day, I don't think. So I think it's about, not expecting everything to be easy, not expecting everything to happen. Like, it takes resilience, it takes hard work, it takes effort, and it takes drive to keep trying. And then I think you succeed. So I think it's knowing not to quit and knowing not to give in to that feeling of self-indulgence of, I'm not good enough. Like, all that self-indulgence we tell ourselves, like, it's so ridiculous. And I think when you can get to the bottom of that voice on your shoulder that's telling you you're not good enough, you're this, you're that, if you can stop that voice, then the people that have got that desire to start their own business, but they're listening to that voice, you'll find it a lot easier, because you won't be listening to that voice of doom telling you that you're going to fail and it's ridiculous and all the rest of it, because it won't be there.
Well said. I think sometimes I feel like replacing the word failure with something more positive. Like, that was a good experience. I can't sum it up exactly, but there's something missing. Maybe as a communicator, a branding person, you can have a think about that. I definitely think we need to rebrand the word failure. Failure seems so negative, doesn't it? And actually, it's a huge positive.
I can't think of who the entrepreneur was, but I read this interview ages and ages ago. I can't think who it was. Anyway, someone amazing. I can't remember their name, but they were amazing. And they had said...
let's just say Elon Musk could be done with it. It's easy.
Yeah, we'll say it to him. But no, because he's been a bit dodgy in the Amber Johnny case. So I don't think we'll say him.
Okay.
But it was somebody, and they had said that when they got back from school, their dad or mum, whoever it was, or caregiver, said, what did you fail at today? But in a positive way, so they could learn from it.
Yep.
Whereas we're ingrained in saying to our kids, what was good? And they go, well, such and such doesn't like me anymore. You go, no, what was good? But it's okay, isn't it? It's like that film Inside Out. Have you seen it?
I haven't, no. I will watch it now.
I really would watch it.
Okay, I will watch it now or after the podcast.
Well, we could watch it now and get some popcorn. But,
I think it's interesting. I think the word good is actually negative, and the word failure is actually positive.
It depends how you dress it up, doesn't it? Well, that's good.
I mean, and good is kind of the whole line. Good is the enemy of great, right? And so, I often say to my son, "You're good." Well, what does that even mean anyway? It's good or it's bad. Who's deciding these things, and what's failure and what's not? Who's deciding these things anyway?
What about you're interesting?
Yeah.
You're really interesting.
Yeah.
Surely that's a much bigger compliment than you're good.
Yeah. By the way, you said Disney of me, just to make, you've got to be careful. You got Nutcracker, you're saying Disney.
That's because one of my acquaintances / friends, I was on a podcast with him, and he is so annoying, and he keeps introducing me as someone from distance. So I'm over associating, trying to distance myself, and now I'm mentioning it. So he's properly into my head.
Right.
So
they have words. They listen to words, and then it gets highlighted that someone's talking Nutcracker and Disney, and can we charge them? So they absolutely can't charge you or me for this broadcast. Disney is a way of explaining a feeling. We're being positive about Disney, but
but is it really a feeling, or is it really sick? Anyway, yeah.
Yes. Anyway, I knew what you meant. Do you think when you look at what's going on in the world of education now, you've got 2 children. They're not young children anymore. I think they're 10, 11, 12. You said.
12 and 10.
Yeah, 12 and 10. They've been through the school system. What's your view on education?
So I think that I think it's interesting. I don't think that's an easy question. I think for me, I was always told at school, always quite negative. Now, how hard I tried, I was never going to get an A star. Even if I gave the same paper as someone else, I'd always get a B plus, because the teachers didn't inherently like me because I was cheeky, I was chatty, I didn't fit into a nice box. But I think education is power. I think it gives you options. And for my kids, who are exceptionally well behaved at school, whenever I come out of their parents' evenings, I'm always like, wow, that apple does fall far from that tree. It's incredible, actually. But I think for me, education will open doors and it gives them an opportunity. Now, with our system, it does mean that you have to get numbers in a box against subjects which are they going to help you in the future? Well, I don't know. But the fact is that is how our society is set up. So you have to encourage them to do their best at that to enable them to have options, in my opinion.
Do you see your children going to university? Do you think university is the right?
I think it depends. I think it depends what they want to do. It depends whether they want to. It depends whether it's going to add anything. I mean, I think sometimes university can add stuff just because it's a life experience. Whether or not that's going to enable you to go and get a better job than go and get an apprenticeship, I don't necessarily think that's the case anymore, unless you want to go and be, a profession which requires a degree to enter it. So I guess it depends on what they want to do. I don't think they've failed if they don't go. But equally, I want them to fulfill their dreams. So whatever they want to do, I want to equip them as best I can for them to fulfill it. So if that involves needing to go to university to do a job they want, then I'll make sure I encourage them. And also I'm quite realistic with them. Like, they see me work hard, which is why I think they work hard. And, I'm quite realistic about the fact that, to have a nice life does cost money. So there's having dreams, but there's also, I don't know how to give an example, potentially if anything, but if a lot of people had a lot more steer when they were younger and you said, right, well, that's really great, but you're still going to only earn that in 40, 50 years, they perhaps would make a different choice. Like, I think it's about equipping children with the reality of what being an adult is. I mean, I support the Young Enterprise charity, and I went into a school to work with year 9 around learn to earn, and I sat around a table with some young people, and you got this questionnaire, and it's like, what kind of life do you want? What kind of house, car, all this stuff. Of course, they're all ticking, they want everything. And then at the end it was, well, to have that life, you need to earn £250,000 a year. And the average joint income in the UK is something like 30,000, so I think there's a reality of what do you want? Now, some people aren't materialistic, so they're not going to be governed by that. So I think it depends on what your drivers are, what you want, how you see your life, and what you want from your life. I think that should affect what you go on to do, rather than, I would never say to my children, you're going to be a failure if you haven't become a lawyer. I want them to fulfill their potential. And I mean, life's great, isn't it? I want them to enjoy it. And like you said, I don't know if it's before this we recorded or started recording, but if you do something you love, it doesn't feel like work. And I think that's so true. Like, yeah, I might get stressed with Nutcracker. It might be overwhelming at times, but I genuinely love what I do. So do I mind that I work at the weekend sometimes? Do I mind that I've worked for most holidays I've had in the last 6 years? No, because I love it.
Do you see your children going into the entrepreneurial realm? Do you think that's...
I think that's up to them.
Any instinct right now? I guess I'm getting a tip from my own son. Like, what's the? Do you encourage it or not?
I think my youngest is extremely creative. I think she'll succeed in something where someone else has got put structure around her, so she can just be creative. I think my eldest could absolutely run her own business, but that might change. She's only 10 years old, my youngest. I might, I don't really care what they do. I want them to be really decent human beings that have great opportunities, that fulfill their potential. What that looks like is up to them. I'm not really a tiger mum in that sense. I just want them to fulfill. I want them to feel confident, fulfill their ambition, and feel great about the world.
I think it's a great attitude, and I think that sometimes I didn't have a good education, similar to you. I felt like I just didn't really enjoy school. I didn't get much from it, but I think it's important to have an open mind. Not because I didn't enjoy school mean my son won't, right?
Yeah.
And just assume that he won't want to do the things that I didn't want to do. So it's
I've been tougher because of that. I've been tougher because I was that child whose parents left almost crying at my parents' leaving. I have said to them that's not acceptable. You know, like you have to. There's certain things that are acceptable, and like listening and paying attention is kind of a deal breaker. You know, so I think I'm tougher because I know how rubbish it is to be singled out at school, and how it's so much easier if teachers like you.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, they're probably going to listen to this podcast too, so you better say how much you love them very quickly, because I'm sure you do.
Well, my children, I love my children.
Of course.
I teachers, I don't love them.
Well, but it is a difficult one, isn't it? Education for your children is particularly difficult, I think. I mean, I'm having that trouble myself, deciding what is best for my child when I don't know what they want yet. And sometimes they don't know what they want either. So, yeah, but I mean...
my children are privileged. I go to a private school, which automatically gives them opportunity, you know. They're very lucky. I've worked with lots of schools from disadvantaged. I mean, like you said earlier, good fortune. I mean, my kids are born lucky. They're lucky. They're loved. They're secure. They've got great opportunities. But do you know what? A lot of the successful people I know have actually had quite tough starts in life. And I sometimes wonder, when you said about entrepreneurs born or bred, I sometimes wonder whether actually entrepreneurs are better if they've had some form of like something really tough happen, because I think that resilience and that drive and that kind of burning desire to succeed is there far more than if you've had an easier start. I don't know.
Well, no, I mean, I think actually statistically it's true. You know, people that have had a hard upbringing. I mean, you can pick celebrities if you want, and ones you like and ones you don't. But you know, if you look at a lot of them, like Mike Tyson, for example, grew up in the streets, having to survive by fighting bare knuckle, right? I mean, you could argue that conditioned him to become a world champion boxer. He didn't turn out to be a particularly good human being, but you know, but ultimately, I mean, he's actually got his own podcast show now. Interestingly enough, that's really,
I wouldn't get my ears near him.
It's very well. Fun. That's funny you say that. I wonder if they've done something around the podcast he's doing right now.
I'd be literally there like this. Hi, Mike.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, you know, he was a street fighter, right? So that's why a lot of people were scared of him too. But you know, I totally agree with you. There's an interesting dynamic. I have the same dilemma with my son. My mother kicked me out of home at 15. I mean, so it was actually, you know, it was not good at the time, but a blessing later in my life. I now love my life, and in part it's because
I don't know. Is that ever a blessing?
Well, I mean, ironic. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I really love my life now, and I wouldn't change a thing.
I'm not saying you don't, but that's tough. 15 is too young. That's tough.
Yeah, well, I mean, my mum doesn't agree. She thinks it's you know, it was good for me, and part of me agrees. You know, that I think there is an element to your point that I'd had quite a privileged upbringing up to that point, and if I hadn't learnt the value of having to pay the bills myself and having to make things work and buy my own first car and so on, you know, you don't necessarily appreciate these things in the same way.
Yeah, and I had a very tough time at certain stages. So I don't know, and I'm not even near as successful as you are. Lots of other people that have had tough times, but I think that I do wonder whether actually, you know, that toughness does give you more resilience.
But that's back to the conditioning, born or bred, isn't it? I think you can be given resilience without necessarily being given hardship.
You know what? I think you can, except for we've probably got to cut this short soon, haven't we? But I was reading this interview around. I can't remember what it's about now. These stories are terrible, aren't they? But this article was around children that end up in therapy, not children, young adults that end up in therapy. And this psychologist was saying that one of the reasons she's seeing all these people is not because they've had something terrible happen to them or something, you know, it's because they've been told in their lives how great they are and how wonderful they are. Their needs have all been met. They've been told that even when they're terrible at maths, been told they're good. So when they go into the real world, they can't cope with it because all of a sudden no one's sitting there telling them that their crappy work is brilliant. And, you know, so actually they're set up to have a dissatisfied life because parents can't turn around to them and say, no, you're not particularly strong at that. However, look at what you are strong at. Like, and I don't know whether or not some of this mollycoddling and I've certainly got challenges with my own daughter now around kind of screen time and what's acceptable, what's okay for 12. And, you know, there's a lot of parents, I think, that are afraid to say, no, that's not cool. You can't do that. You know, and I think that otherwise, if you don't have more boundaries with children, I think they do go on to be adults who, how can they have resilience and determination if they've never had to have it? They haven't learned that along the way. They haven't learned that they're going to climb that tree, scrape their knee, do it the next time they have to do it. They've never had to learn, you know, that it's okay. Because they're too busy, someone kind of wrapping them up in cotton wool and going, don't worry, darling, it wasn't your fault. They're all terrible. Well, actually, no, perhaps you were terrible and learn from it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, we could go deep on this subject too. I think we should just create our own podcast series. Talking to you, I just feel like there's a lot. I was talking to a psychologist around how to deal with children, and one of the elements that I picked up on that they were talking about was how when a child would say to a parent, "Are you okay?" and the parent, if they're not okay, will still say they're okay, but the child knows that's not true. So they don't get to pick up on the, what is the truth and what is not, what is resilience and what is a lie, and that kind of whole, like, that we tell them not to lie, yet we lie to them.
Yeah, and we say don't cry. Well, why don't cry? Cry, let it out.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, we get into a whole
parenting. Let's have a crying session now. Let's just,
Yeah, okay, you go first. You go first. But no, I mean, actually, you're right. Our listeners give us an hour of their time, and I'm enjoying talking to you so much that we're overrunning. But so I'll have to have you back on, and we can talk about all these things in more depth. But I wanted to just kind of finish off the podcast, maybe on something a little lighter. In the vein of how we've been talking today, this will turn into something heavy, but let's try anyway. If you went back to your younger self and gave some advice, what would it be?
I think it would be to be kind to myself. To be kind.
Were you unkind to yourself when you were younger?
I think I'm quite a hard taskmaster with myself. I think kindness to yourself is quite a good skill.
I like that.
What would you say?
Well, I don't know you. I didn't know you when you were younger. I wouldn't know what to go back and say.
What would you say about you?
Oh, I see. I know what you mean. Yeah. Well, I mean, for myself, I mean, interestingly enough, if I went back to the 15-year-old me, because I was always interested to pick ages that you're at, right? I would probably say it's going to be all right. And actually, this might feel like bad luck and a hard time, but somehow it's actually good luck and the best of times, So, yeah. Well, you asked me, who's interviewing who here? Well, Jenny, thank you for your time. I'm going to sum up some of the things I've taken from our chat today. And so I like the opening things that we talked about. And I kind of took this line, which is sales is not an argument, which is interesting. I like that whole line you said there, and you were kind of joking, but I do think sometimes sales is a debate, but certainly not an argument. But I do like that framing of sales a little bit, that getting people to think about sales in a different way. You said don't give in to fear, which I also like. I think I had this thing about fear being actually a skill and an asset and leaning into it, which you then went on to say. You went on to say that you actually kind of lean into the opportunities and you don't shy away from it despite people installing fear in you. And I turn that into panic. In my mind, that's a panic. People are trying to make you have panic. But fear is actually a good thing, and you push through that. I think you mentioned in context perception is a very important thing, to what other people's perceptions are, your own perceptions. I think that's a really good word for people to keep in mind when they're getting feedback. What is that person's perception of the situation? What was their life like when they're giving you that advice? Does it necessarily relate to something that's relevant for you? I mean, that's why I do this podcast, because I have an opinion and other people have an opinion, and I want people to have perspective based on lots of different opinions. Don't tell Jenny what to do. I like that. I think that should just... It's probably on your company wall, is it? But I kind of just want the listeners to know, in case they make any comments, telling you what to do.
I'm very, very open to constructive feedback.
Yes, I know. That's different to telling you what to do, though. Constructive feedback.
I love being wrong, because you can learn.
And I think that's something you mentioned at the end of the podcast, the whole concept of people can give feedback, and you need to be resilient enough to have that feedbact. Resilience is very important.
You need to listen.
Yeah,
totally.
But that is different to telling you what to do. And I think personalities like yourself, giving you advice and giving you feedback is awesome. Just don't tell you what to do. I feel the same way, by the way. I don't like people.
Yeah, I'm not great at that. I
like the point you mentioned about what if. It is such a negative connotation, what if, but what if it can be positive? I really like that point you've made. Brexit is bad luck. COVID is a challenge, but actually an opportunity as well for people to reassess their lives, reassess what's important, readjust their businesses. And it's actually more positive than Brexit. I think we should make that into a t-shirt. And
because you said about everyone's pulling in the same direction, which I think is a distinction. So kind of that's really, you got that point, really.
Yeah, I'll take credit. Yeah. So maybe I should do a podcast show. I like the point we talked around failure versus good. I think failure is a positive word. We need to work on coming up with a better word than failure. Somehow it doesn't frame itself right, but actually failure is good, and being good is sometimes bad because it can be the enemy of great. So I do think the universe gives you what you ask for, a bit like you were explaining in the early days about what you did when you went out there and started a business, and then went to a lunch and you told someone you started a business, and because you put it out there, you then got the business that led to your success. So asking the universe for what you want is good. I like your end statement too around be kind. And my dogs always bark at the end of the podcast, so now is the right time for them to bark. But be kind to yourself and be kind to others. I think that's genuinely just a wonderful message.
But I really think it's true. Like,
no,
when you're quick
I love it.
when you're quick to bite someone's head off, you're quick to criticize, you're quick to be difficult. Like, why?
Yeah,
what are you going to achieve? Like, you're not going to shift your bad energy. You're still going to feel lousy. Just make someone else feel lousy.
Totally. And I think being kind, sometimes it's not about telling people what to do or giving judgment or even giving advice. It is just being kind and listening, isn't it?
Yeah.
So on that note, I want to thank our listeners for listening to us. I want to thank you for joining us and sharing your wisdom with my listeners.
Thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you for joining this week's episode of the Good Luck Club podcast. I hoped you enjoyed Jenny's insights. If you did, can you give us a comment below, or perhaps click through to Jenny's companies and give her social media pages a like. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to us today. We know you have thousands of podcasts you could be listening to, and you take time out to listen to ours. We feel incredibly lucky.